He's gone, Anna. Your husband, Marco. He didn't make it. And the baby, Isabella. She's missing. Missing. That one word. It slammed into me harder than the cold tiled floor I vaguely remembered hitting, harder than the fists, harder than the terror that had clawed its way up my throat until I couldn't breathe. Lying there in that sterile hospital bed, swathed in bandages that felt like a mummy's shroud, every inch of me, a symphony of agony, that word, missing, was the one that truly broke me. Marco, my Marco, with his easy laugh and the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he looked at me, at us. Gone. And Isabella, our tiny, perfect Isabella, with her tuft of dark hair just like his, and the way her little fingers would curl around mine, missing. It was a void, an abyss, a rip in the fabric of my world so vast, so absolute, that I thought I'd fall into it and never stop falling. The doctors, the nurses, they tiptoed around me with their hushed voices and sympathetic eyes. They saw the physical damage, the bruises blooming like grotesque flowers on my skin, the stitches pulling at my flesh. They couldn't see the inferno igniting inside a raging, white-hot fire of hatred that consumed every coherent thought, every memory of warmth, every prayer I'd ever uttered. They didn't understand that in that moment something within me had irrevocably changed. The Anna they were trying to patch up was already dead. In her place, something else was being forged, something cold, something hard, something that would live for only one purpose. You see, just weeks before our world hadn't been this landscape of pain and fluorescent lights. It had been, God, it had been so ordinary, so beautiful in its simplicity. Marco and I, we were young, head over heels, dumb in love, young. We lived in this little apartment in a neighborhood where everyone knew your name, where the smell of Sunday sauce drifted from open windows and kids played stickball in the streets until dusk. Our Isabella, she was the center of it all, a tiny sun around which our lives joyfully orbited. Marco would come home from his construction job, dust still clinging to his clothes, and his whole face would light up when he saw her. He'd scoop her into his arms, whispering nonsense words that made her gurgle with delight. We had dreams, the kind everyone has. A little house with a yard, watching Isabella take her first steps, her first day of school. Simple dreams, the best kind. Then came that night. It was late. We were walking home from my cousin Maria's, taking the slightly longer route through the quieter streets, because Isabella had finally fallen asleep in her stroller, and the gentle rocking seemed to keep her peaceful. It was one of those still city nights, the air thick and warm. And then we heard it. Shouts. A sickening thud, like a side of beef hitting concrete. Marco, always protective, always brave, pushed me and the stroller back into a darkened alleyway. "Stay here, Anna. Don't move." But I peeked. I couldn't help it. And what I saw, it seared into my memory a permanent brand. Salvatore Moretti. Even then, his name was whispered with a certain kind of fear in the neighborhood, an enforcer on the rise, ruthless, ambitious. He was standing over a man, his face contorted in a snarl, a heavy pipe in his hand. There were others with him, shadows with equally menacing faces. It was brutal, vicious, a display of raw, savage power. I saw the man on the ground twitch, then go still. My breath hitched. Marco pulled me back, his face pale. "We need to go, now." We tried to be quiet to melt back into the night, but one of them, a weasel-faced kid, spotted the movement. He yelled. Moretti's head snapped up, his eyes cold and black as polished stone, fixing on us. There was no shock, no fear of being seen, just calculation, and a chilling kind of annoyance like we were insects he had to swat. They were on us in seconds. Marco, my brave, beautiful. Marco. He threw himself in front of me and Isabella. He fought. God, how he fought. But there were too many of them. I remember screaming the stroller, tipping Isabella's sudden terrified wail. Then a sharp, blinding pain as something heavy connected with my head, and the world tilted, spun, and dissolved into a roaring blackness. The last thing I saw through a haze of blood and fading consciousness was Moretti. He wasn't looking at me or at Marco's broken form on the ground. He was looking at Isabella, who was crying in her overturned stroller, and in that moment, with an icy calm that was more terrifying than any rage, he bent down and he picked her up. My baby, he just took her. Waking up in that hospital, the doctor's words echoing in the sterile silence, it wasn't just grief that flooded me. It was a purpose. A cold, hard, diamond-sharp purpose. The official investigation, they called it. It was a joke. Questions, platitudes, sympathetic nods. But Moretti, he was untouchable, shielded by layers of money lawyers and fear. Witnesses suddenly couldn't remember. Evidence vanished. The system, the one I'd believed in, the one Marco had believed in it, was a useless, toothless thing against a monster like him. I learned that lesson the hard way. So what do you do when the world you knew is ash? When the people you loved are gone? When justice is a fairy tale? You become something else. You crawl out of the wreckage piece by agonizing piece, and you start to learn. I was consumed, you understand. Grief was a constant companion, a shadow that never left. But beneath it, that fire of hatred, it burned hotter, clearer. I started listening, really listening to the whispers in the neighborhood, the hushed conversations, the names dropped in fear. Moretti, his family, their rivals, the Rinaldis. I learned about the intricate, brutal dance of the underworld, the codes, the hierarchies, the unending thirst for power. I hit rock bottom, of course. Emotionally, I was a wreck, barely functioning. Financially, Marco's small savings dwindled. The apartment once filled with love and laughter became a mausoleum haunted by ghosts. There were days I didn't want to get out of bed, days I just wanted to fade away. But then I'd see Isabella's tiny discarded teddy bear or a faded photograph of Marco, and that cold fire would flare, pushing me on. The system wouldn't help me, so I decided to find a different system. It was a desperate, insane gamble. I'd picked up a tiny piece of information, a whisper about a Rinaldi shipment, something small, almost insignificant. But it was all I had. I found a way. Don't ask me how those were dark, blurry days. To get a message to Don Rinaldi, the patriarch of the rival family, a calculating, old-school mafioso known for his cunning and his own brand of ruthlessness. I remember standing in his dimly lit office, feeling so small, so fragile, like a mouse in a lion's den. I laid out what little I had. The intel, yes, but also my story. I didn't cry. My tears had dried up, long ago replaced by something harder. I told him about Marco, about Isabella. I told him Salvatore Moretti had taken everything from me. And I told him I would do anything to survive, and one day to see Moretti pay. I offered him my loyalty, my mind, my life, if it came to it, all for a chance. Don Rinaldi just watched me, his eyes like chips of ice, unreadable. He was a man who understood currency, and he saw the currency of my desperation, the raw, unadulterated hatred I carried for his enemy. Perhaps he saw a tool, a potentially useful if unconventional asset. He didn't offer sympathy. He didn't offer comfort. He offered me a lifeline. A very thin, very dangerous one. He brought me into the periphery of his organization, a ghost in the machine. And so began the long game. Years. Decades, can you believe it? They blurred into a monotonous cycle of survival and silent preparation. I was initially underestimated, of course. A grieving widow, a broken woman. What threat could I possibly be? But they didn't see the steel that had replaced my spine. The ice that now flowed in my veins. I learned. Oh, how I learned. I absorbed everything like a sponge. The codes of silence. The subtle power plays the intricate webs of loyalty and betrayal. I became a master of intelligence gathering, of sifting through whispers and rumors to find the hard nuggets of truth. I learned to analyze, to predict, to manipulate all from the shadows. My grief, my rage, I locked them away deep inside, hidden behind a carefully constructed facade of cool competence and emotional detachment. I became indispensable to Don Rinaldi in my own quiet way. I wasn't a soldier, not in the traditional sense. I was his eyes and ears in places his men couldn't easily go, his analyst, his quiet strategist. He trusted my competence, my unwavering loyalty, or what he perceived as loyalty. He never knew the true fire that fueled me, the singular burning purpose that guided every decision, every action. And through all those years, I never ever stopped watching Salvatore Moretti. I gathered every scrap of information, every rumor, every sighting, his businesses, his associates, his habits, his family. And then I started hearing the whispers of Bella Moretti, Salvatore's beloved daughter. Not biological, they said, adopted, rescued. Some stories claimed from a tragic situation. A young woman growing up in the lap of luxury, fiercely loyal to the man she called father. Intelligent, strong-willed. Each mention was like a fresh stab to my heart, a private torment. Bella, my Isabella. Could it be the timeline fit? The story twisted and perverted fit. The suspicion grew from a tiny seed of hope and dread into a near certainty, a poisonous vine coiling around my soul. But I couldn't act. Not yet. The timing had to be perfect, so I filed it away, each piece of information a stone in the foundation of the vengeance I was meticulously building. You know, it's a funny thing what time and a singular all-consuming purpose can do to a person. I barely recognized the woman I'd become. The hopeful, loving Anna was a distant memory, a faded photograph. In her place stood someone else, someone harder, colder, someone capable of navigating a world of sharks without being devoured. It's a kind of humanities lesson, isn't it? How trauma can reshape a soul, how grief can curdle into something else entirely. The ancient Greeks wrote about it, the concept of miasma, a stain of pollution caused by a terrible crime, one that could only be cleansed by justice or vengeance. I suppose I was living my own Greek tragedy, only I was determined to write my own ending. The cycle of violence, they say, is hard to break. I wasn't trying to break it. I was trying to master it, to turn it back upon its source. Then, after nearly 25 years of waiting, of biding my time, the cracks began to appear. Words started to filter through the underworld, first as whispers, then as more confident murmurs. Don Salvatore Moretti's health was failing. The iron grip he'd held on his empire for so long was weakening, and with that weakness came the inevitable jockeying for position, the scent of blood in the water, succession. Moretti had a biological son, Vincent. Everyone knew Vincent. He was the stereotype of the entitled mob scion. Arrogant, hot-headed, impatient, and frankly not very bright. He swaggered around, basking in his father's reflected glory, but possessing none of Salvatore's cunning or steely discipline. He was a liability, a disaster waiting to happen, and Salvatore, for all his monstrous flaws, was no fool when it came to his business. He valued competence, loyalty, the kind he believed he had cultivated, above all else. In a move that sent shockwaves through his inner circle and ripples of astonishment through ours, Salvatore made his intentions known. He wasn't going to name Vincent as his heir. He was going to name Isabella, Bella Moretti, la Cis. By now, she was a young woman in her mid-20s, raised in the heart of that venomous family, groomed by Salvatore himself. She was reportedly intelligent, capable, and fiercely devoted to the man she believed had saved her, the man who had given her everything. The irony was a bitter pill, one I swallowed daily. My daughter poised to inherit the empire of the man who had destroyed my life and stolen hers. Vincent, predictably, was apoplectic. His rage was incandescent, his wounded pride a dangerous, festering thing. I heard about it, of course, through my network within the Rinaldi organization. Don Rinaldi himself was watching the Moretti situation with keen interest, always looking for an advantage. And as I processed the news of Vincent's fury of Bella's anointment, a cold, clear certainty settled over me. This was it. This was the chaos I had been waiting for, the opening I had spent a lifetime preparing to exploit. The years of patience, the endless nights spent poring over information, the carefully cultivated connections, it was all about to converge. I began to subtly, carefully maneuver Rinaldi resources, my own hidden assets, aligning the pieces on the chessboard for a game only I truly understood. Vincent, blinded by his entitlement and sputtering rage, wasn't hard to predict. He was a blunt instrument, and his next move was as clumsy as it was brutal. He decided he wasn't going to be denied what he saw as his birthright. He plotted to murder his own father and, in a stroke of what he probably thought was genius, frame his adopted sister Bella. And he did it. Salvatore Moretti, the man who had haunted my every waking moment for over 2 decades, was assassinated. Not by my hand, not directly, but his own son, his own rotten fruit, had done the deed. The news hit the streets like a thunderclap. And just as Vincent had planned, the evidence skillfully planted all pointed to Bella. My Bella, my Isabella. Imagine her world. One moment she's the cherished daughter, the heir apparent. The next, the man she loved as a father is dead, and she's accused of his murder. Devastated, horrified, betrayed. She was forced to run a fugitive, hunted by the law, and more dangerously by the faction of her own family, now loyal to Vincent, eager to curry favor with the new, albeit illegitimate, boss. But Salvatore, for all his evil, had possessed a strange, twisted kind of foresight, perhaps even a sliver of what he might have considered affection for the girl he'd stolen. During her desperate flight, Bella found it, a contingency he'd left for her. A safe deposit box, or maybe an encrypted drive. I never got the exact details. But what it contained, it was the truth. The undeniable, gut-wrenching, world-shattering truth. Salvatore Moretti was not her savior. He was the monster who had murdered her biological father, assaulted her mother, and kidnapped her as an infant. He'd even included just enough information. A name, perhaps a vague description, a hint about what happened to me, for her to start searching if she dared. I was watching, of course. Every move, every whisper, every tremor in the Moretti organization, I knew it. Rinaldi was watching too, but for different reasons. He saw a chance to destabilize his rivals, perhaps pick up some territory. I saw my moment. The moment I had lived for, breathed for, sacrificed everything for. It was time. Using Rinaldi's resources, I pitched it to the Dawn as a strategic move. Bella Moretti, I argued, was a valuable asset. She knew the Moretti organization inside out. If she was on the run, desperate, we could acquire her, turn her. Rinaldi, seeing the cold logic, agreed. He had no idea of the inferno raging beneath my calm exterior, no inkling of the true stakes of this particular acquisition. So we engineered her capture. It was carefully controlled, designed to look like a typical underworld snatch, but ensuring her safety, ensuring she was brought to a secure private location, a place where I could meet her, alone. Can you imagine that moment? For me, it was the culmination of a lifetime of pain and longing. For her, God, for her, it must have been terrifying. She was brought into a room, disheveled, exhausted, fear and defiance warring in her eyes. And there I was, a stranger, just another face in the nightmare her life had become. I let her sit. I let the silence stretch heavy and suffocating. Then I started to speak, and I told her everything. I told her about Marco, her real father. I told her about our life, the love we shared, the dreams we had for her. I told her about that horrific night, about Moretti, about how he'd ripped our family apart. I laid out my decades of suffering, the burning hatred that had kept me alive, the intricate patient path I had walked to reach this very moment. I corroborated the information Salvatore himself had left her, filling in the gaps, painting the full, hideous picture. She listened, stunned into silence. Disbelief warred with a dawning, horrified comprehension on her face. Tears streamed down her cheeks, tears of grief for the father she'd known, tears of confusion for the mother she'd never met, tears of rage at the monumental betrayal that had defined her entire existence. She was grappling with it all. The monster who had raised her with affection, the sudden ghost of a mother emerging from the criminal underworld she was now a part of. It was too much for anyone. When I was done, the silence returned thick with unspoken emotions. Then I gave her a choice. I could arrange for a new identity money, a chance to disappear, to build a life far away from all this, from me, from the blood and the pain, a fresh start, or she could help me. She could help me finish what I had started a quarter of a century ago, help me exact the revenge that was rightfully ours. Help me destroy Vincent and tear down every last brick of the empire Salvatore Moretti had built on our family's ashes. She looked at me, then really looked at me. She saw past the composed facade I'd worn for Rinaldi, saw the raw, unshakable rage that still smoldered in my eyes, the years of agony etched into my face. She was her father's daughter, yes, Marco's daughter, strong, resilient, but she was also, in a way, Salvatore's creation, touched by the darkness, understanding its power. And she was mine. After an eternity of internal struggle, a battle I could almost see raging behind her eyes, a new kind of resolve hardened her gaze. Her own complex grief, her own searing sense of betrayal, it found an outlet. She chose to fight. Alongside me, her mother. And so the ghost and her daughter, we became a team, a clandestine force of nature. Rinaldi knew I had turned Bella, that she was feeding me information. He was pleased, thinking he was manipulating the situation to his advantage. He never suspected the depth of our connection, the true, terrible purpose of our alliance. Bella, Isabella. She was a revelation. She possessed an intimate, invaluable knowledge of the Moretti operations, their weaknesses, their key personnel, the secrets whispered in the dark corners of that criminal enterprise. She knew where the bodies were buried, literally and figuratively. I, with my decades of strategic experience, my understanding of the underworld's intricate dance, and Rinaldi's unwitting support, began to systematically dismantle Vincent's attempts to consolidate his stolen power. It was like conducting a dark orchestra. Bella would provide the notes, a corrupt lieutenant here, a hidden ledger there, a vulnerable supply chain. I would orchestrate the chaos. We turn Moretti loyalists against Vincent, subtly fanning the flames of their own doubts about his competence, their suspicions about his involvement in Salvatore's death. We leaked damaging information to rival families, to select hungry journalists, even carefully curated anonymous tips to law enforcement, just enough to cause trouble to bog him down. We sabotaged his operations, watching his fledgling reign crumble before it could even take root. Vincent became increasingly paranoid, isolated, lashing out, making mistakes. He was a cornered rat, and we were slowly, methodically sealing off all his exits. The final confrontation wasn't a dramatic shootout, though there was always that risk. It was a carefully orchestrated trap, a series of events that exposed his guilt in Salvatore's murder, so undeniably, so publicly within their world, that his remaining support evaporated like mist in the sun. Some say his own disillusioned foot soldiers, disgusted by his treachery and incompetence, took care of him. Others say he was arrested thanks to one of my final evidence-backed anonymous tips. All I know is he was gone, utterly discredited, his power base shattered, his name a curse. The Moretti empire, built on so much blood and betrayal, crumbled. It didn't happen overnight, but the rot we'd introduced spread quickly. I made sure of it. And just as carefully, I erased any lingering traces connecting me or Bella to the takedown. I even subtly maneuvered things so Don Rinaldi didn't gain too much from the power vacuum, maintaining a delicate balance. My revenge was complete. Cold, total, and devastating. Salvatore Moretti was dead. His chosen successor was dead. His legacy was in ruins. And my daughter was by my side. Which brings me to now. Several years have passed since that whirlwind of destruction. You wouldn't recognize me from those days, and you certainly wouldn't recognize the setting. We're far from the city, far from the shadows and the whispers. It's a small house bathed in sunlight near the coast. You can hear the ocean if you listen closely. It's peaceful. Bella. She still goes by Bella. It's who she became, and I wouldn't take that from her. She's out in the garden. She's planting roses of all things. Sometimes I catch her reading, a small smile playing on her lips. Sometimes she even laughs, a full, genuine laugh that reminds me so much of Marco. It makes my heart ache in a way that's more sweet than bitter now. I watch her. There's a quiet satisfaction in it, a sense of completion that revenge alone could never have provided. The iron is still there, deep in my soul. I don't think that will ever truly leave me. But the burning, all-consuming rage, it's cooled. It's now just a quiet ember, a reminder of the inferno I walked through and survived. Our bond, Bella's and mine, it's tangible. It's not simple, not easy. There are scars you see, deep invisible scars that ache on cold nights. We talk sometimes about Marco, about the past, about the future. We're still healing, both of us in our own ways, but we're together. We've built this fragile piece, this new life from the ashes of the old. My journey from that shattered woman in a hospital bed to the avenger who brought an empire to its knees, it's complete. And in the end, it wasn't just about the destruction, the vengeance, as satisfying as that was. It was about reclamation, reclaiming my daughter, reclaiming a piece of my stolen life, reclaiming the right to see the sunrise without the weight of hatred pressing down on my chest. It's not the life I dreamed of all those years ago with Marco by my side, but it's a life. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I can look towards tomorrow, not with dread or with a thirst for blood, but with a quiet, hesitant, almost forgotten sense of hope. And that, I suppose, is the most profound victory of all. How do you find today's story? Leave a comment below if you like this video. Please like and share. Especially, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our interesting and exciting stories.